Hello, everyone, and welcome to Skill Sessions. And of course, very happy New Year to you all. Thank you so much for joining us for the first webinar of 2025. It's absolutely lovely to have you here. Please say hello in the chat and let me know where you're joining from. I think our furthest attendee was from Mexico in 2024. So I'm keen to know if we've spread any further this year. Let's have a little look at the chat. So we've got Alice joining from Bristol. I'm in Bristol as well. Hi, Alice. Oh, flurries. Glenys from Manchester, a people ops manager in Bristol too. Belfast. Nice haircut, Claire. Thank you very much. Feel free to drop in more compliments in the chat. Fiona from Glasgow, Chris from Merseyside, Kylie from Fife. Keep those messages coming in, folks. And also, let me know, is this your first Skill Sessions event? Is this the first time you're joining us, or have you been with us before? I'm going to scan back to the chat again now. Anushka from Portsmouth, Alashola from London. Thank you, Lucy, for the compliment again. Keep the compliments coming in. Why not? So we're going to be kickstarting your year with the very wonderful Sarah Petherbridge. But before we introduce Sarah and get stuck in with her webinar, I just want to welcome you all to Skill Sessions. So whether you're brand new to these events or you've been with us before, welcome and thank you so much for coming along. We've been running them now for around 18 months, and there's a community of over 2,000 of you, which is just brilliant to see how that has grown over the last year and a half. The objective of these events is to bring you experts and speakers on a range of topics around inclusion and neurodiversity in the workplace. So you can always find information about our upcoming events on the CareScribe website. For example, next month, we're discussing working groups with retail giant Not on the High Street. Or you can also follow us on LinkedIn as well. We share lots of event information on there. And we have our past event recordings available for you to watch back at your own leisure on our website. So carescribe.io, with summaries and additional information and resources for you to explore. I think a member of the team is dropping some links in the chat for you now. So before we skip on to the webinar, firstly, who are we? Who are CareScribe? Well, we're the organisation that makes these events happen. We're an award-winning assistive technology company based in Bristol, and we create assistive technology to help people who are neurodivergent or who have disabilities to be more productive and more confident in their work or in their studies. So we have two products: Captioned, which is captioning and note-taking software, which helps people capture and comprehend just the piles of information which gets thrown at them either at work or in education. And we have TalkType, which is highly accurate, lightning fast dictation software, which works on all platforms. So Mac, Windows, Chromebook, and on mobile as well. Did you know that in the UK, around 12 million working age adults experience hearing loss? They often face challenges like listening fatigue during meetings. So for many, Captioned has been quite a game changer in overcoming those barriers. And our very own Chris Hamlin, who's a member of the team here at CareScribe, is running a webinar taking place next week on the 16th of January, where you can have the chance to see how Captioned is transforming accessibility in the workplace. So if you are an inclusion manager, an accessibility manager, maybe a people director or a HR director, essentially, if you're responsible for improving inclusion and accessibility in the workplace, this webinar is suitable for you. So if you want to join the Accessibility in Action webinar next week to find out more about how Captioned supports colleagues with hearing loss in the workplace, our team should be just popping the registration link in the chat for you now. Now, a bit of housekeeping. If you've been with us before, you will notice a new addition for this session, which is Lydia. So Lydia is our British Sign Language interpreter for today. Thank you so much for joining us, Lydia. As you will know, if you're a regular attendee of these sessions, we are always looking to improve them and to make them accessible for as many people as possible. So your feedback and your suggestions are always welcome. We also understand that some people can struggle to concentrate with added distractions. So if that's the case for you today, right now, please feel free to leave the live webinar, because we will be sharing the recording of today's session in the follow-up email tomorrow, and we will include both the BSL recording and we'll also include the speaker-only recording in that for you. There'll be a feedback survey in the chat when you exit the webinar as well, and this is where you can let us know how you found the session, and you can also request a certificate of attendance. Finally, before I introduce you to Sarah, I just want to let you know how you can get the most from today's event. So, as many of you are already doing, and as I witnessed at the start, we do encourage you to join in the chat and talk with other people on the call. The community that we have built up over the last 18 months, over 2,000 people, is so special to us, and the chat really helps bring that to life. So I would totally encourage you to spark conversation in there. Again, I appreciate that for some people that can be distracting. So if you need to, you can turn off your chat previews and you can mute the notifications. If you have questions for Sarah, which I'm sure you will do, and I hope you will do, please put them in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. So you should see at the bottom of your screen, it says Q&A. Put your questions in there, because the chat gets quite busy and it does mean that sometimes questions get lost. Put your questions in the Q&A section, and you can also upvote questions as well. So if there's a super popular question that's been asked, we know to prioritise that to Sarah. And finally, as I mentioned, this webinar is being recorded, so you can review it at a time and a pace which suits you, or you can share it with colleagues and peers as well. Tomorrow you'll receive a follow-up email with a recording and also a full transcript generated by Captioned. Thank you so much for your patience. That was a lot of talking at the start from me, and I know you're not here for me, you're here for Sarah. So thank you for your patience. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to invite Sarah to join us on screen. And while Sarah does that, I'm going to give you a very quick introduction. So Sarah is an authentic disability awareness trainer and public speaker on disability, inclusion, and mental health. And Sarah bases her work on her own lived experiences of working and living with profound deafness. Sarah helps businesses create inclusive workplaces for people with disabilities, making her the perfect guest speaker for me to hand over to for our first skills session of 2025. Thank you so much, Sarah, for leading today's session, The Silent Workplace, Understanding Hearing Loss. I am going to leave it in your capable hands for the next 40 minutes, and I'll jump back on screen at the end and we can get stuck into some questions. So Sarah, over to you.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to share my screen. Get back to that. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see my slides okay. So hello everyone, we're pleased to be here today to give you some training on how to best support employees with hearing loss in the workplace, and also create that really important, accessible, inclusive workplace for people with hearing loss. So we'll just move on to, I'm just trying to move the slide. It's not letting me move the slide for some reason. Okay, here we go.
Oh, there you go.
Sorry about that.
Up on the screen to help you,
Sorry
Sarah.
about
I'll
that.
disappear again.
No worries. Okay, so we're just going to have a look at the agenda. So first of all, we're going to kick off with my personal story briefly. We will then look at the prevalence of people with hearing loss in the UK. So some key statistics around that, in particular in the workplace. And then to start educating you on how to best support people with a hearing loss, we need to first of all understand what are the challenges and barriers that people face in the workplace. We will then move on to how you can help remove some of those barriers. There's some very specific and practical tips there around removing the barriers and also create a more accessible and inclusive workplace for people with hearing loss. And then finally, we will explore what else you can do as allies to create that safe and inclusive workplace and foster real allyship in the workplace. So let's kick off with who am I? So I was born profoundly deaf to a hearing family. My communication style is oral, so I lip read and speak. I do know some bits of sign language, but I'm not fluent. So I do have a bit of a deaf accent to hopefully be able to understand me okay today. Unfortunately, I have come down with a bit of a cold, so I'm a little bit bunged up. So hopefully, the captions will enable you to follow what I'm saying. So I qualified as a chartered accountant and a tax advisor. I wasn't there with my dream job. I didn't wake up one morning and said, I wanted to be an accountant. But it was something that I could do with my disability at the time and gave me financial independence. I worked at various accountancy firms, including EY, which is one of the largest global firms in a senior management role. And it was there that I set up a disability network called Ability EY for people working there with disabilities and long-term health conditions. So we provided mentoring and support to help people thrive at EY. I'm now running my own business and providing disability awareness training and public speaking on disability, inclusion and mental health. And then finally, I act as a consultant to various not-for-profit organisations like RNID, which is the largest deaf charity in the UK, and Sun Health. So, how could I get there? So, what is my personal story? Or rather, what is my personal journey? So, my personal journey wasn't always an easy one. I was born profoundly deaf at a time of very little deaf awareness, or in fact, disability awareness. So having a disability was like having a social stigma. British Sign Language was not an officially recognised language, so we were never really encouraged to learn to sign. Instead, we were expected to learn to speak. So I went to a mainstream primary school with a partial hearing unit, and I learned to speak with pretty intensive speech therapy over so many years. I grew up in the hearing world because I was born to a hearing family, but I had very little in the way of deaf identity or deaf culture or deaf friends. We lived in a very rural environment, so we didn't know that many deaf people. So I had no real sense of belonging. I didn't really belong in the hearing world because I was deaf, but I didn't really belong in the deaf world either because I didn't know that many deaf people. I learned coping techniques like masking, where you cover up your disability just to fit in, while living and working in the hearing world and navigating numerous barriers. Not surprisingly, my mental health was affected as I took on a more senior role at work. So what could I do to help my mental health? I began to articulate more clearly my needs for workplace adjustment and my preferred working style. I set up a disability network, Ability EY, and through that I was able to reach out to other people with hearing loss and share my personal experiences and my personal story. And I was able to get more support from other people who also had hearing loss. I work with a more diverse, inclusive and supportive team, where I felt that I could be my authentic self and I felt I belong. I learned BSL and I joined the local deaf club, so now I know more deaf people in my life. More importantly, I learned to set clear boundaries to protect my mental health, Rather than just masking and coping, I learned to say no. I've took care of my physical health too, really important, help to build resilient. I use mindfulness and I practice kindness and compassion for myself. And then finally, I chose my allies, people who don't necessarily have a disability themselves, but who have my back and make sure that I feel included and supported. But I'm not the only one with this type of personal journey. My personal journey is not unique. There's so many of us out there with a similar personal journey. And that is reflected in some of the key statistics we'll be looking at. 12 million of working-age adults experience some form of hearing loss. That is more than 1 in 6 of us. More than half of deaf people and people with hearing loss are reluctant to discuss their hearing loss with their employer for fear of consequences. So for over 50% of us, there is no safe space for us to talk about our hearing loss in the workplace. And instead, we're fearful of negative consequences like judgment or bias against working with us. More than half of people who are deaf or have a hearing loss have felt that they have been treated unfairly at work and have experienced teasing and mocking from their colleagues. 7 in 10 said that colleagues have not communicated effectively with them. So you can get a sense from these figures that it's really hard work for deaf people in the workplace, and you can get a sense of isolation and exclusion for us in the workplace. Recent public polling found that over a quarter of people would feel uncomfortable being told to manage someone who is deaf or has a hearing loss. More than 50% of employers admit that they have limited or no understanding of the challenges that people with hearing loss face. So if they don't know what the challenges and the barriers that we face in the workplace, then it's not surprising that so many people feel uncomfortable or don't feel confident to manage someone with a hearing loss. So in order to help you understand those sort of challenges or barriers that employers with hearing loss face in the workplace, let us explore some of the more common type of barriers. The first common type of barriers is what we call environmental barriers. So these are barriers that are found in buildings and office spaces and so on. And they can be physical barriers or non-physical barriers like acoustic barriers. So some typical examples of barriers for deaf people can include things like a noisy open-plan office with lots of background noise. So if you take someone like me who wear hearers, our hearers amplify everything. There's no filter, it doesn't cut out the background noise. So all the noise comes through our hearers and our amplifiers. And that can be really overwhelming and very stressful. And very often I need to sit there with my hearers twist off just to cut out the background noise. Another barrier is poor lighting. It's really, really difficult to lip read someone or to see someone signing to you if you have poor lighting in the workplace. A lack of suitable health and safety procedures for people with hearing loss can be another barrier. For example, there's no personal emergency evacuation plan in the case of a fire alarm. We don't always hear the fire alarm. Or if a deaf person gets stuck in the lift that has broken down and can't use the intercom, there's no procedures around, what should we do if that happens? Another common type of barrier is technology barrier. So, for example, a lack of accessible technology or not having the right technology for people with hearing loss. So some examples of that include a lack of captions or BSL interpreters on video calls, no subtitles or BSL interpretation for any pre-recorded presentation or training videos. I can remember clearly in my last job, we had to do mandatory training videos every year, and very often they came without any subtitles. So I had to arrange for those videos to be sent away and transcribed. And that just added a lot more delay and stress in completing my mandatory training. And then finally, no transcripts for any sort of voiceovers with maybe embedded in materials like training materials. Another type of barriers for deaf people are cultural and attitudinal barriers. Now, these are the more harder barriers to break down. They are based on behaviours and mindset which can be entrenched. So, for example, making the wrong assumptions about what we can do or our ability to do the job. People thinking that we're deaf and therefore can't do the job. Also making wrong assumptions about our needs without really talking to us first. So, for example, communication needs. People thinking that we all need BSL interpreters, but not everyone signs. Another barrier is the lack of communication towards people with hearing loss. You may remember from when we were talking about the key statistics that 7 in 10 said that their colleagues don't effectively communicate with them. And that can lead to isolation and exclusion in the workplace. Non-inclusive and ableist language that is not inclusive or respectful. Saying things like, well, you don't look deaf, so are you really deaf? Okay, so what does a deaf person supposed to look like then? Or in my case, you sound funny, you sound drunk. Not, people not realising that it's taken me years, to learn to speak like this. This is my deaf accent. So saying things like that can devalue us and diminish our experiences and feelings. Inflexibility in others over a working style. Sometimes we can only work in one or two working styles that can accommodate our deafness. And some people find that difficult to accept or are not prepared to be flexible. And then finally, unconscious bias and hence discrimination. So people having bias against working with us because we think we can't do the job, because we're deaf. But that can lead to missed opportunities in terms of work and promotion and also, discrimination. And then finally, another common type of barrier is what we call organisational planning barriers. So, for example, inaccessible meetings, both face-to-face and online. So, for example, having large face-to-face meetings around a large boardroom-style table, makes it really difficult to follow what's been said. In terms of online meeting, too many people to follow online and people are over talking. And this was something that I found particularly difficult during the pandemic when everyone was online. So doing group video calls all day, every day was really tiring for someone like me who lived with, and where people were over talking. Inaccessible social event, for example, hers and noisy and dark pubs, really difficult. Inaccessible work event, for example, hers in venues with terrible acoustics. And for all of these, people not really asking their employees beforehand if they require any adjustment to be able to attend those meetings or social events and so on. Inaccessible policy, for example, not written in plain English, really important for those of us who sign, and English is not our first language. And having policies that are not in plain English can also mean that they can be really difficult to follow. We are quite literal in our communication. We like things to be black and white. We're not great on the grey stuff. And also no BSL interpretation of those policies. So these are just some examples of barriers that we may face in the workplace. So what are the impact of those barriers? It can lead to exclusion and isolation in the workplace. So from social conversation, event, meetings and so on, because we find it difficult to follow what's been said and we can't participate. It can also mean not being able to perform so well at work because we haven't got the right workplace adjustment. It can also mean fewer opportunities for work and promotion due to unconscious bias. And then not surprisingly, it can lead to mental health impact. 1 in 2 of us suffer from mental health impact because of all these barriers that we face in the workplace and also outside of the workplace. We're more likely to leave our job or retire early due to the difficulties faced at work. So some surveys held out by the RNID found that 60% of people with hearing loss had retired early. And of those people, 56% said it was because of their hearing loss. So how do we remove some of those barriers? We make adjustments to remove or minimise those barriers. So it's really important to discuss with your employees what are the barriers they're facing and then come up with the right workplace adjustment. So let's go through some examples of adjustment that you can all make to minimise those barriers. In terms of environmental barriers, a good way of cutting out the background noise is to perhaps have a designated desk in a quiet area. So very often with open plan offices, people sit wherever they like, depending on what's available. But if you have a designated desk in a quiet area where they can sit there all the time, that it can be really, really helpful in cutting out the background noise. And that was something that I had in my last job. I just had a permanent desk in a quiet area of the workplace. Make sure that that your deaf employees are working in wireless areas. There's plenty of lighting. People who use BSL or rely on lip reading need to be able to see the people they're speaking to clearly. And then in terms of health and safety requirements, have a think about a personal emergency evacuation plan for your deaf employees so they can be aware when the fire alarm goes off. So you may need additional support like a vibration pager, or you could train one of your fire stewards to actually go up to your deaf employee and alert them individually that the fire alarm is going off. In terms of meetings, some adjustments you can make before those meetings, whether they're online or offline. Really important to check in with your deaf employee. What are their communication needs? So what do they need to be able to follow what's being said at the meeting, but also to participate at the meeting? So do they need a BSL interpreter? Do they need a note taker or captions and so on? But do ask them before the meeting. If you're having an in-person meeting, make sure you select a quiet location with no background noise, and think about the layout of where people are sitting. And it's always more beneficial to have a horseshoe or a circle layout so that people can see other people speaking. It's really helpful for those of us who lip read, for example, rather than a large boardroom style table. You may want to think about nominating a note taker, someone who could take notes on the laptop or has responsibility for making sure the captions are working on the laptop. There's someone who has responsibility for note taking. If you have a very long meeting, like 2 hours, do schedule a break every hour. So for people who lip read like myself, it's really hard work, lip reading all the time. We need our break. Also really important for any BSL interpreters to have their breaks too. And for online meeting, put the accessibility features on online, make sure they're working, that the captions are working. And you might want to think about sending the meeting agenda in a bond to your deaf employee. the more information you can give them, the better equipped they're going to be in following the meeting and being able to participate in the meeting. Or you can ask the deaf employer to actually set the agenda, and that's something that I did, would actually be responsible for setting the agenda, until I knew what was going to be discussed at the meeting. So it's really important. In terms of adjustment during the meeting, both online and offline, so for online meeting, most everyone who's not speaking, to help to cut out the background noise, which may be difficult for some of us. Turn on the captions, make sure everyone has their video camera on. Record the meeting and provide transcript so they have a written document of what's been discussed at the meeting. For offline meetings, I find that helpful if people would actually raise their hand before they start speaking. I don't have any direction of hearing, so it's quite hard to locate the speaker. So if someone can raise their hand, it means that I can lip read the right person. Don't cover your mouth. Speak clearly but normally. Don't over enunciate. It's really difficult to lip read if you over enunciate the words. Speak once a time. Something quite obvious, but if people are over talking all the time, it makes it difficult for us to lip read. The caption can't cope. And it's really difficult for a BSL interpreter to follow what's been said if people are over talking. And then finally, look out for anyone who is an outsider. I think this is a really important point. If you are facilitating the meeting, read the room. And if you notice that your deaf employee is not really contributing or participating at the meeting, ask them, do they have any questions? Are they able to follow what's been said? And give them extra time to contribute at the meeting. For someone like myself who's a lip reader, I need a bit of extra time to process what's been said before I can respond. So just sort of read the room and just make sure that everyone had a time to contribute at the meeting and it's not being left out. In terms of in-person seminars and events, book BSL interpreters, arrange live captioning or speech-to-text services. So you can either arrange for someone to come in person and provide live captioning, or they can dial in remotely. This is something that EY did a lot when I was working there. Before video calls became more common, we had someone who would dial in remotely and give me live captioning during conference calls. It was an absolute lifesaver, enabled me to do my job. Or you can use captioning software to give you the captioning that you need. Provide assisted listening devices. If anybody needs them, say for example a hearing loop. And similar to what I mentioned about sharing meeting agenda in advance, have a think about sharing event materials in advance. So the more information you can give your employee, the best in advance, the better equipped they'll be in terms of being able to follow what's been said at the event. And then finally, choose the venue with great acoustic and has a clear stage view, and that you're able to reserve front row seating for your deaf intended. In terms of communication tip, always remember that our communication styles and needs vary. So always ask us on an individual basis how we communicate and what adjustment we need. So if someone were to ask me, I would say, needs a face maker so that I can lip read you. I would need good lighting. I would ask people not to over enunciate words when they're speaking, and the captions for online calls and so on. Please talk to us. Let anyone know. Talk to us, let anyone know we're human. Please don't ignore us. Deafness can be a lonely and isolating disability. Don't worry about offending us if you get it wrong. We're just educated for next time, but please talk to us. And be respectful in the language, really important. And you may want to think about learning some basic sign language as well. There's so many ways of doing this. You can do this with trained BSL tutors, or you can learn some really basic phrases from the RNID on their website. So, it's a fun language to learn. Have a go. Always use plain English, verbally and in writing. As I mentioned before, for many BSL users, English is a second language, and plain English is so much easier to understand. So some tips there. Use the kind of informal language that you would use when you're speaking to a friend or a family member. So avoid any sort of technical words or jargon. If you need to need them, make sure you include a definition. And as I mentioned before, we're very black and white sometimes in terms of our communication. So need literal language rather than fancy language. We're not great on the grey stuff, we're quite literal. So avoid things like metaphors and that look at nuances. Social conversation can be really hard work for some of us. If we're joining the conversation, it's always a good idea for someone to introduce the topic to that deaf employee. They might want to say things like, "Oh, well, we're talking about the football game last night. What do you think about the football game?" And in that way, we can get on board quickly what everyone is talking about. And in terms of social events, always think about having social events that can be more inclusive. So in locations that are well lit and don't have too much background noise. And in that way, that helps us to join in the social conversation. And then finally, I would say that if a deaf person asks you to repeat something, please don't say it doesn't matter. Or I tell you another time, it does matter. All you need to do is just be patient, just repeat what you've said, maybe rephrase it differently, but it does matter. And we need to be able to join in the conversation. If you're a manager, just some additional tips on how to manage someone who has a hearing loss. Think about creating that really important psychological safe space where your deaf employee can feel comfortable about opening up and talking about their hearing loss. So it's really important as a manager that you create that safe space. And when you do talk to them, just normalize that conversation. Have those conversations on a regular basis, and really listen to your employee when they're talking about their issue without any judgment or bias. Understand the barriers that they are facing while they're doing their job, and then ask them what adjustment they need to be able to do that job. And then be proactive in providing that accessible support. And while you're having a conversation with them, make sure you use inclusive language, be respectful. And ask employers how they would like to self-identify themselves. Not everyone likes the word disability, for example. Some people don't like it because they think it's too negative, and they would rather, self-identify differently. I personally don't have a problem with the word disability. I identify myself as a disabled person, but always ask them how they would like to self-identify themselves. And then know where to go within the business for extra help around workplace adjustment. Do your homework. Know how to get HR policies, for example, or how to get in touch with the occupational health team, or how to get in touch with our IT team to put in place accessible technology. So just, do your homework, know where to go to get that extra help. Remember your legal responsibilities around workplace adjustment. Employers have a legal duty to put in place with readable workplace adjustment. To have a proper process in place for recording and also reviewing the workplace adjustment. And then finally, walk the talk. If you are a manager or a leader, Be explicit in your everyday behaviour, the importance of understanding and valuing differences in people. Be that inclusive leader, really important. It also helps to create that safe space we talked about earlier, to encourage people to open up and talk about their hearing loss. So what else can you do as allies to create that safe and inclusive workplace and foster allyship? It requires every one of you in the team applying inclusive behaviours as ally, whether you're a manager, a leader, or just a team member. And this will help to create that really important psychological safe space where deaf people can be their authentic self and feel that they belong. They can then be more willing to open up, talk about their hearing loss, and ask for help. An inclusive and safe workplace also helps employees to thrive and contribute their best. Inclusive behaviours will foster real allyship in the workplace, being inclusive of everyone in the workplace. So what are the general inclusive behaviours that everyone can adopt every day? So on the next two slides, there's some examples of inclusive behaviours that you can adopt for all disabilities, not just hearing loss, and something that you can do every day. Remember, disability is a spectrum. Every one of us is a unique individual with unique needs. We're not the same. So always look at each one of us on an individual basis. Don't make assumptions about what we need and can do. We can't possibly know. Answer the right question and be curious. Learn about our disability and lived experiences to avoid making the wrong assumption. Remove your low expectation around what we can do. Always assume that we can and maybe we will. Focusing on our abilities and not our disabilities. So focus on what we can do despite our disability or not what we can't do because of our disability. Check your stereotypes and biases. We all have them in our subconscious part of our brain. Understand where they come from and then work to remove them. Otherwise, they can impact on the way that you work with them. Flex your working style. Always ask us, what is the best way to work with us that accommodate our disability, like deafness, and then you flex your working style. I know I keep banging on about this, but please talk to us. We are human. Find safe spaces to listen to our issues without judgment and biases. And learn about accessibility and inclusion. Educate yourself. Self-reflecting your privileges. Have a think about what you can do as an able person that perhaps a disabled person can't do. And then use your privileges to raise awareness and advocate for us. Take proactive steps as allies to bring down the barriers and create a more inclusive workplace. But be that active ally and not just a bystander. And while you're there, call out non-inclusive behaviours and others that may make people feel devalued. Be brave, call it out, and give them feedback to help them change their behaviours. Tuck in on us regularly. Ask us 3 magic words. Are you okay? How can we help? What support do you need? Just normalise those conversations and have them on a regular basis. And then finally, practice empathy, not sympathy. We don't need you feeling sorry for us. We just want you to show empathy. Underlying all of these behaviours is empathy. Some of us have it in brackets and are born with empathy, others less so. But you can work on it and develop empathy. Empathy is a hallmark of an active ally, someone who really listens to us, understands us, and supports us. So I'm just going to leave you with a few takeaway points. There are more people with hearing loss than you think. Hearing is a non-visible disability with no obvious difference. And think about whether any of those barriers that we cover today is just in your workplace and what you can do to help bring down those barriers for people with hearing loss. Remember, deafness can be a lonely and isolating disability. So foster real allyship in the workplace by demonstrating our inclusive behaviours to create that inclusive, safe and inclusive workplace where deaf people can belong and thrive. So I just want you to leave you with one final thing. This was a quote from one of my former ER colleagues, and I think it's a really good quote to share with you. And it basically said that if you don't intentionally include them by way of inclusive behaviours, you can end up unintentionally excluding us. So I think it's down to all of us to really intentionally inclusive by way of inclusive behaviours, and at the same time create that safe, inclusive and accessible workplace for people with hearing loss. So that's the end of today's webinar. Thank you for listening, and I'm going to pass over to Claire for some questions. Thank you.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much for sharing your presentation with us today. If you're able to, you've already done it. I was going to say, stop sharing your screen. You're on the ball, Sarah. Thank you so much for that. I think for me, there was a real, like the biggest takeaway or like the epiphany for me was just when you talked about exclusion and people feeling isolated from, you know, those behaviours in the workplace, whether intentional or unintentional. So thank you for certainly raising my awareness to that outcome and the impact that it can have for people with hearing loss in the workplace. We've had a few messages in the chat and we've got some questions as well. So Sarah, we'll use the next 5 minutes to go through some of those questions which have come in. So we've had a couple here from attendees which are focused around sort of social events at work. So someone has said, in my workplace, we try to vary the events that we offer since everyone is different and enjoys different things. But I'm always worried that most of our events do tend to run in the evenings, outside working hours in venues that are darker and noisier. So they've asked if you have any particular social events which you'd recommend, which are better or more accessible for welcoming deaf people.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult one because you know, people do tend to go out in the evening and maybe sort of gravitate towards pubs and restaurants. But I think it really down to all of us to be a little bit more creative and think outside the box. You don't have to socialise in the evening. You can, you know, socialise over lunch. You can just do things like maybe go out for a walk, or you can go to a coffee shop that is quieter, or you can, you know, go out for lunch that's in a quiet restaurant. I think, you know, it's trying to be a bit more creative and thinking outside the box, really. And sometimes, actually, people who don't have a hearing loss but may prefer not to socialise after work because they've got childcare to think about as well. So it can actually benefit other people, not just people with a hearing loss. But it is really, you know, it's stopping and think, okay, what else can we do with our employees with hearing loss that is much more inclusive, and also asking them what they would like to do. You know, would they prefer to go out for a walk or do something that's more inclusive for them, rather than just gravitate to the pub and, you know, noisy restaurants. And I think there's a trend of moving away from that anyway. But you know, sometimes, you know, you may have an event in the pub, perhaps. That's not to say you shouldn't have any event in the pub, but just be a little bit more varied, a bit more flexible. But I think the first thing to do is to ask your deaf employee what would be beneficial for them.
That's such a valid point, Sarah, just, you know, asking. And then you're getting the feedback that you're after, I suppose. Just to segue away from the questions for a second, we're getting some really wonderful comments in the chat following your presentation. And I just want to read some of those out to you now. So thank you, Sarah. So helpful and insightful. Hazel says, thank you so much, Sarah. Very helpful and lots to think about. And just people saying thank you and how useful this has been. So yes, I want to echo those sentiments as well. Absolutely. So we've had some more questions come in, and this one here from an anonymous attendee says, do you have any advice for people applying for assistive technology via Access to Work?
Yeah, I think there's a problem with access to work at the moment, and it's probably not the best question. And there's been a lot of delays with the process. I know of some people have been waiting for months. Also, I think I don't understand it. I'm not really up to date with what's going on with access to work, because I think they're actually overhauling the whole system. It's under review. But I have heard horror stories of people who have applied, and it's been a long time coming and getting grants from access to work. So personally, I was very lucky, working for firms that can afford to pay for the technology. So without having to apply for access to work. If you need something quickly and you can afford to pay for it, I would personally, get your employers to pay for it, upfront. Because I do know that there is a problem with access to work at the moment. It's just been very slow. And I think the key thing is to get your workplace adjustment in place as quickly as possible, so enabling you to do your job, but also to make sure that you're going to be reviewed fairly when it comes to performance reviews. So, any workplace adjustment you have needs to be put in place before you have your performance review. Otherwise, it's not going to be a fair process. So I don't know whether that's a really helpful answer, but I just think if the employer can actually pay for it quickly, I think that's probably the best option.
It's certainly given some people food for thought in the chat. Anushka said they're running at over, they being Access to Work, are running at over 30 weeks from application to them contacting you back. Alice says that people that they work with applied in February and March last year are still waiting, which speaks to your point, Sarah, around the importance of that accessibility and inclusion being led by the business, and like the business
Yeah,
investing in that
absolutely.
software for people, because then it means that you don't have to wait, and you don't have to wait and go through the lengthy process through Access to Work. You can get access to the assistive technology and software and hardware that you need through your work in order to be more productive.
And
So
also, it just means that they can perform on their job. So, and I think it's really important for managers to really get on board the whole process as quickly as possible, because, there are some statistics around work, and managers been very slow in putting workplace adjustments in place as well. So, I think, managers need education on how to put workplace adjustment in place as quickly as possible. Because there are some statistics around people waiting for like a year for their manager to put the adjustments in place, let alone access to work. So there's some training to be around, heard around that, really.
yes, for sure. And this, I suppose, can form part of it. So like I mentioned at the start, for anyone on the webinar, we do record these sessions. So if you want to increase awareness throughout your team, throughout your business, please do feel free to share the link with your colleagues and with your peers as well. So we've got 5 minutes of the webinar left, and thank you everyone firstly for all of your questions. We've had a few comments come in through the Q&A as well, just people pointing out some stuff. That one person has said, Paul, if you work or manage a deaf person, remember that they may miss tons of information if your team talks over each other. So don't penalise that person if they lack certain information related to work. That's an observation that someone's made. So yes, thanks for sharing that, Paul. Someone else as well has talked about adjustments, suggestions, and said that if there is a Q&A, the person answering the question should repeat the question they're going to answer. This person says they concentrate really hard to hear one person, and switching between the main speaker and someone in the audience is quite sort of fatiguing for them. So again, thank you everyone for your contributions. I did say this at the start, but the real power for me in these skill sessions is the community that we bring together and all of these sort of responses that we share with each other. So Sarah, I just want to say thank you so much again for your time today, and we've just had like the most wonderful feedback and thanks coming through for you in the chat as well. We've had some people mention captioned in the chat, and I will just take the opportunity to remind people about what I said at the start of this webinar. If you are interested in knowing how Captioned, which is captioning and note-taking software, can help disabled or neurodivergent people in your workplace, we're running a webinar next week. It's on the 16th of Jan. There will be a link in the chat, I'm hoping, but certainly in the follow-up email afterwards as well. So if you enjoyed today's webinar, please, can you help us spread the word and share skill sessions with your LinkedIn network? Every bit of word of mouth helps, and we're really eager to grow this community and just create a really valuable network for people, whether you're neurodivergent yourself or you manage a team of people in an organisation and you want to better understand how to support. So I have mentioned that we have the product demo webinar next week on the 16th of Jan, so keep an eye on your emails for a link to register for that. Next month, Skill Sessions is back again, and we have Ben and Noor from Not on the High Street. You may have heard of them, you may have bought your Christmas presents from there, and they will be talking to us about working groups. So you can sign up for that session now on our website, the registrations are live, or keep an eye on our LinkedIn page, just search for CareScribe. Keep an eye on your emails for more exciting speaker announcements coming soon. But I just want to say thank you once again. Thank you so much, Sarah, for your presentation today. It was incredibly valuable, and what a way to kick off the year. Thank you so much, everyone. In a moment, we're going to share a link to a feedback survey. That will be in the chat as well, and you can request a certificate of attendance. Thank you so much, and I will see you next month for the next skill session. Thank you again, Sarah, for your time. It was really wonderful to hear from you today.
You're welcome. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.